one little pound you set at the sea. The little guy's sinking, the bigger fish swims. From the second you're waking up bed, that's harder than lead. You drown in this town. Hard, this town can be hard. They deal up the deck, your hand is a wreck, you drew the wrong card. The little guy borrows, the bigger fish owns. From the minute you try to compete, you're too little to eat. You're done and they've won.
Hey everyone, it's me Arthur Kade, and Bill, I was just congratulating you. This looks like a lot of fun. You have the show Cagney starting, and you know, when you hear the name Cagney, obviously you think of James Cagney, you think of Hollywood icon, but we don't know his whole story. This guy came from nothing to becoming a Hollywood icon, and you get to tell that story. Talk to me all about it.
Oh, it's a great story to tell, and he was such a private person that this really gives you an insight into something that very few people know about. The level of his celebrity was off the chain, and long before people were tearing apart the backstory and the bios, this guy lived a very private life. He became very famous, very rich, and very happy, but there's another side to the story.
What I love is when we think of celebrity today, because I deal with it every single day, there's different levels, different forms of celebrity. We have Instagram celebrities, we have Hollywood celebrities, we have Kim Kardashian-like celebrities. Back then it was that old Hollywood celebrity. I mean, when you were a movie star, you were a movie star. Talk to me about that celebrity, what he dealt with and what he lived in Hollywood during that time.
Well, not only did he earn it as a hardworking actor who really took his craft very seriously, but he had to work at it for years to become the icon that he was. It wasn't a one-off. It wasn't just one quick hit and there he was on the cover of every magazine. It took years, and it took Warner, which is really our story. Warner was an idol maker in a way that is just not true anymore. He really was old school. He can be credited with Davis, with Garbo, with even a little bit with Jolson, not as much, although I've done that musical as well. But Cagney really was so connected to Warner, and Warner was so connected to the period, to the zeitgeist of that time. He says in our play he knew what the public needed and he gave it to them. A tough guy, the David to the Goliath of the war, or the Goliath of the atom bomb, or the Goliath of the Depression.
He had such humble beginnings, James Cagney. I mean, he was a vaudeville performer. I mean, this guy, like you said, he paid his dues. Talk to me about those humble beginnings.
Well, it was New York beginning. His parents were from Ireland. He really had a rough start, a very rough start, starving, tenement, walk up hot, eviction, you know, that classic story of the underdog. In fact, it's arguable that he learned on the streets of New York what it meant to be a tough guy, and I think that's what he brought and what Warner saw and what made him, first of all, a gangster in the eyes of the American public before he danced and pranced around in Yankee Doodle.
In telling this story, obviously it's musical. So talk to me about putting this story to music and being able to express the inspirational part, but also the other side that you had mentioned of what he had to deal with.
Well, I think I have to give a lot of credit to the composers of this. Also, the star, Bobby Creighton and Christopher McGovern, were using the Cohen songs, some of them, because it would be a disappointment not to, since he was so famous for that role. But there's an original score here, mostly, that really begins to examine what was going on in this guy's head. And there is a conflict here that after lots of study the writers have figured out, and that is how you really come to understand your own image. Because when you become a megastar like this, the public thinks they know you, and they know you from how you're represented, and he was not always happy with being represented as a gangster.
When you get to play a Hollywood icon, you've got to talk to me about this, because I'm like, you know, I can't imagine portraying someone who so many people of so many generations are familiar with, and you're doing it.
Yeah, he is. He's one of a kind, James Cagney. I mean, he was known to a lot of people as the quintessential gangster, but of course he started in vaudeville and he was a real song and dance man. And I think he appeals to a lot of different people for those reasons. He's a lot of different things. He could sort of do it all. And to get a chance to, and he grew up in New York, born in New York, grew up in New York, was a fighter on the streets of New York, and to get to bring this story to New York about this guy, this tough guy who started with nothing and became one of the great Hollywood icons, as you say, of all time, is a real privilege.
You mentioned the story because it is such a fascinating and inspiring story. I mean, this guy starts from nothing, becomes a vaudeville performer,
yeah.
And next thing you know, Mr. Warner finds him and turns him into one of the great icons of a generation.
Yeah.
Talk to me about telling that story, bringing that story to life.
Well, The interesting thing, I started as just a complete fan of Cagney when this idea, sort of the germ of this idea started. And what we've really done by collaborating with a director and a book writer and all those people who know how to create a story for the stage, we have focused on that fact, the fact that it was Jack Warner who sort of pushed him into that persona that he is known for, and for which he became rich and famous and all those things, but he resisted in a way because in his heart he was an artist and a song and dance man. But the other interesting thing is he started it all just to get a job. He didn't start it because he had some dream, like I did as a kid, to be in New York and be on Broadway. He started it because his family was poor, he was working 4 jobs, and the truth is he needed a job, and he could move a little bit, and he would go and let other people go before him in auditions and then imitate their steps. That's how he first got his first job. I don't think that answered your question, but it is an interesting story from rags to riches.
I'm always fascinated, though, when you have to portray somebody. Like, I have enough trouble being me, you know, let alone having to replicate or create someone who we know so much about, or we believe we know so much about. How, in terms of research, what did you do to become James Cagney?
Well, this thing all started in acting school when a teacher said, you remind me of Jimmy Cagney. You're sort of built like him, you tap dance, and so I started watching his films, and I just became mesmerized by who he was on screen, first of all. And in fact, just last night, I started watching the Roaring Twenties again. I watched about the first half last night just to sort of get in the mood. And I am reminded about why I was so passionate about him. He is so detailed. He was ahead of his time as an actor. He believed every word that came out of his mouth. His characters all had little quirks and details that were on purpose, looked totally real and natural, but he meant to put them there to make them each distinct. And so to try and portray someone like that, really, for me, it's about finding his essence and not really imitating what he did, but just absorbing all those, watching all the films, knowing about his life, what he came from, how he responded to people on the street, and how he, and in going through this, knowing, I've gotten a lot of stories about how he was as a man in the real world. When people needed something, he was always there to help people and that kind of thing. But to portray him, I don't imitate. You just sort of take that essence and then just play it for real. That's what he did in his Oscar-winning role for Yankee Doodle Dandy. He said, I don't imitate George M. Cohan, because then you can only do what he did. You take the essence and then play it for real. And so I try and take Cagney's advice in playing Cagney.
Bill talked about, your director, how complicated he was. There were a lot of sides to James Cagney. Talk to me about that complicated nature that he had.
Well, it's true. I mean, as a kid, even if you read his book, Cagney by Cagney, the first 30 pages are dedicated to his street fights, you know, like, and all the characters on his, and he came from nothing, poor, working 4 jobs to help support his family at a very early age, a dad who was, you know, sort of jovial and people liked, but did not support the family and was out, you know, a drinker and that kind of thing. And he started as a hothead and that kind of thing, and then he grew into this really deep artist. He quit acting in 1963, and for 20 years he raised horses and painted and supported causes and sort of stayed out of the limelight and thought very deeply about things. And you can tell when you read his writing, he, you know, besides the hothead and the dancer and the emotional guy that you see, he was also an intellectual and an artist. And he has both those sides really going on, and you see them all in the show.
Josh, I was just congratulating you on the Tony nomination on The Town, one of my favorite productions of the year. So congrats on that. This one looks like a lot of fun, Cagney. Talk to me about telling the story of one of Hollywood's great icons.
Thanks. Yeah, this is really exciting. You know, we've been working on this for quite a while now, and it's been different stages of development, and we're really excited to be here at the York. And, you know, I got to dust off my tap shoes for this one, which is really exciting. Yeah, it's a really fun show. You know, it's a great story about a great Hollywood icon, and the audience gets to learn a lot about James Cagney that they probably did not know.
As a choreographer, how do you tell this story through movement and through dance? What do you want to get out there?
Well, you know, Cagney was such an incredible dancer, so it's almost inherent in the material. You know, there's going to be dancing, and so a lot of it is figuring out the Cagney style and the style of that era, and putting that into the show.
Do you go back in the archives and study his movements and try to replicate them, or is it something that you look at and say, I want to be clean the slate, creative, and just create what I want?
You know, for this, we actually did go back and look at old film footage of Cagney, and you know, Bobby does such a great has such a great physicality, just like that's very similar to James Cagney. So, but we did want to replicate a lot of that physicality and that style of movement and style of tap.
Going from show to show as a choreographer, is it a creative abyss where you say, all right, it's time to start over? Is it tough? What's the process like for you?
It can be tough. Sometimes you feel a little drained. You know, an expression I use every once in a while is the well is dry, and you know, sometimes you have to dig deep to get a new inspiration, and lots of times that's through research, and it's the collaboration. It's the collaboration, you know, with my good friend Bill Castellano, and the writer Chris McGovern and Bobby Creighton, and all these great dancers in this show. You know, we inspire each other. I think I certainly am inspired by their performances.
Bill told me I think this is the 20th time you guys have worked together. Or
yeah,
more?
That's about right. I think we've done about 20 shows together. We've had a long partnership that dates back, I want to say, maybe 15 years.
First of all, this show sounds like it's going to be a blast, and I've talked to your director, the star, everything. Talk to me about putting the music to this thing.
Well, it's one thing. James Cagney is known for those great Cohen songs, so we had to use those. Otherwise, I think the audience would be disappointed. But for us, I think making it an original score was important because there are several points of Cagney's life where you want to advance the plot, just like you would do in a musical. And the Cagney songs, the Cohen songs, don't always do that. So we wanted to fill it in with. It's a largely original score.
In terms of bringing your own creativity, but also using the old stuff, where's the mix come into play?
It's in the arranging, actually. We worked really hard. This is the 4th production of it, so we've had some time to develop it, to develop the orchestrations, develop the arrangements, and so it will all have a cohesive sound. It mostly has to do with the period.
How do you, as a group, bring it all together? The choreography, the music, the acting. Talk to me about the process of bringing it all together.
It's rehearsal, rehearsal, rehearsal. Who said that? How much rehearsal do you need 1 week more? But I think we'll be okay.
See, there's nothing I won't do. Perhaps I'll stay with you. There's nothing I won't do for you. Rodeo, I love you so.